All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Untherapeutic. Today, I have Dr. Dodson, and I'll let you share a little bit more about yourself. But the topic for today is about vulnerability, specifically with men. And I know this comes up a lot, at least in counseling. You see online so many times we talk about vulnerability, vulnerability. You need to be more open. What is it? But today we're going to kind of get an expert who really works with men, not only on this topic, a lot of other topics, but this is one I'm sure that comes up. And as two therapists, it's something that we're tasked with addressing oftentimes, but behind closed doors. So let's start off, Dr. Dodson. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this work. Because they always say, Black man in therapy, you're a unicorn. So
Yeah, yeah.
tell us a little bit
You know,
about
that
that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you, Dr. Hardy, for having me, and for us to be able to create space for this conversation today. So, like you said, I'm a licensed therapist from Memphis, Tennessee, and I also have a PhD in counselor education and supervision from the University of Memphis. So, I'm a licensed therapist, counselor, educator, and behavioral health consultant. And I own a private practice in Memphis, Tennessee, navigating courage, counseling, and consultation, where we do specialize in adult men's mental health. And I train interns and other staff to provide safe spaces for other people in our community so they can go out and create safer communities. So I think the way that I got into this work is growing up as a Black young man in Memphis, Tennessee, and seeing how some dynamics with people around me didn't fit, it didn't work, or it didn't feel good. And I think when we think about therapy, oftentimes our ideal clients are typically a version of us. And I
Mhm.
also think as therapists, we are also working to heal a younger version of us. And we're also trying to redirect generational patterns of behavior. So I would say I got into this work honestly because of trauma, because of loss, because of love, because of identity. And
Mhm.
I think the work that I get to do on a regular basis, I am helping heal generations of men so they can go and be a healed person giving to other generations, right? So it's the cycle that continues to happen. So that's how I got into this work, and I see that as my purpose.
Absolutely. I love it, man. I love it. And we'll get to how to connect with Dr. Dodson at the end, but let's dive into this topic, vulnerability. This is a word that gets thrown around a lot, almost to the
Yeah,
point that it almost makes me resent it because
yeah,
it's used in ways that I'm like, are you really being vulnerable?
yeah.
But tell me a little bit, when you hear people say vulnerability, specifically in relationships, what does it mean?
Yeah. So simply put, vulnerability is you allowing yourself to be seen. You're allowing yourself to ask for help. You are allowing someone or something in,
Mhm.
right? And so when we think about how- this idea of wanting someone to be vulnerable, what are you really asking? You're wanting them to trust you. You're wanting them to express themselves. So when we break down the definition of that word, we're really looking at what do we want the outcome to be, and
Mhm.
that's how we get to what vulnerability is. But I think even what you were saying, now that people have microphones and cameras and an
Everybody's vulnerability
audience,
expert.
everybody is an expert because they had one failed relationship 10 years ago, or they went to therapy one time 5 years ago. But vulnerability is truly this experience where we are. I'll give you an example. I think the last time I was vulnerable is when I told somebody that I felt like a failure,
Mm,
right? And so that was my opportunity to say, hey, this is what's happening with me. So I'm being honest. I'm telling you real time what's happening. And by being honest, I'm taking a chance of someone supporting me. So
yeah,
vulnerability really is stepping out on this limb and doing and saying something that may not have you look so strong or protect your ego, but
yeah.
it does put you in position to receive help or guidance from somebody, and
Mm,
it's a gamble.
it
Vulnerability
is.
is a gamble. It really is. And I think that's why so many men specifically have a hard time with being vulnerable,
Mhm.
because you're taking a chance on someone letting you down.
Yeah.
And if someone let us down, we're going to be disappointed because our expectation wasn't met.
Give
But
me
we
an
also,
example of when
yeah,
someone lets you down,
yeah,
because sometimes when people are vulnerable, they don't even know what they're expecting
Mm,
from being open. It's not
mhm.
as if they go in saying, "I expect you to do this," but you do
Yeah,
know when you're let down, even
yeah,
though you may
yeah,
not have had a clear expectation. How do people let you down?
yeah. And I would say subconsciously, people are really looking for a place of safety when
Mhm,
they are vulnerable. And
mhm,
I think that when you no longer feel safe after being honest with somebody,
mhm.
you're let down.
Yeah.
When someone doesn't facilitate a space where you can continue to explore the thought or the feeling or get a need met, then
Mhm,
we're let down. And oftentimes when we have an expectation, let's say we go into a situation or conversation with somebody, whether it be a boss or a teammate or a friend or a spouse, we're typically expecting something
mhm,
to be validated, to be heard, for them to take our side, whatever the case may be.
mhm.
When that doesn't happen, that can often lead to disappointment because the expectation was that this person is either going to hear me out, let me say my piece, not punish me for being honest. And when
Mhm.
that doesn't happen, then that's where you get people that are either shutting down or get triggered. And that typically takes us back to a place where, hey, I tried this before
And it
and
didn't work.
it didn't work. There was a roadblock. Somebody stopped me or there was a bad experience. And now, how do I protect myself? I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah. Do
I'm not
you
going to
think
do
you should
anything.
express that expectation you on the front end?
I think it depends on the setting. So a skill is a skill, right? In
Mhm,
terms of being honest and being able to communicate, that's a skill that's transferable across whatever setting that you're in. I think I would probably treat an expectation with a conversation with a boss a little bit differently,
yeah.
right? We can say, hey, let's talk at 5 about these points. So I do think across the board, no matter if it's a spouse, a friend, or a boss, we are going to use those same skill set, sort of say,
Mhm.
to say, hey, let's talk about this and name the topic because the worst thing to do is tell somebody, hey, we need to talk and now they're anxious and then they don't know why. So I think maybe not necessarily the expectation, but in terms of this is the topic of conversation that I plan to discuss, we can
Mhm.
even say, hey, I'd love to be able to, by the end of this conversation, find a resolution or something like that. But we also can't dictate on the front end how exactly that correspondence will happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to go back to, you talk about being let down, and this comes up where say you're open, you're vulnerable, and I'm just gonna say it can go both ways, men or women. But in this case particular, say with men, you open up and say 6 months down the line, the thing that you opened up about gets used against you.
Mm,
And how do you bounce back from that? Because it happens, especially in the heat of the moment, if someone's angry, upset, not saying it's okay,
mhm,
but do we, part of me is like, do we fully understand the impact of when we use something against someone during a moment of vulnerability? And is it fair to say, hey, you still got to open up?
mm.
Or are we, what is your advice in those situations?
Yeah. So I would say that anytime that we are being vulnerable, we're really practicing that over
Mhm,
and over and over again. So there is really no self-actualization where you just reach this place where you can always be vulnerable because we're typically gauging how safe we will be in a certain dynamic, whether that's us starting a new job and we're feeling people out, or we're starting a relationship and we're feeling someone out, or you've been married for 20 years and you're still trying to figure out what that dynamic is.
mhm,
So I would say, and this is probably going to be choppy, but I think that when you get in a situation where somebody's using something against you, they're weaponizing your vulnerability, we have to stop and think. So if I'm doing, let's say I'm doing that to you, and
mhm.
we had a conversation that was confidential, and 6 months later I blast you and I violate that trust. That's
Yeah.
a rupture. That's a violation of trust. That's a rupture. And the goal now is to repair that rupture,
Mhm,
right? And in order to do that, I have to do something on my end to take accountability for the rupture and recognize it. And
mhm.
for you, that's going to be you choosing whether you want to or not to trust that I will be able to practice that again.
Yeah.
Does that make
That makes perfect sense.
yeah, so there's a rupture when we bring stuff up back in somebody's face, but
Mhm.
then let's say that I do and I slip because that's just my normal.
Yeah.
Then I get to say, okay, nope, 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 nope. I'm learning how to not. That was a pattern of behavior that I had at one time. Let me work on that. Hey, I'm
Mhm.
sorry. I did that. I'm learning. Right. And
Mhm.
so I think that people can receive that a lot better when you acknowledge it in the moment as immediately as possible. And if you need time to process, like a couple of days, hey, let's cool off, come
Mhm.
back and at least acknowledge it. When we sweep things under the rug or we just shut down because somebody violated our trust, then we typically won't get anywhere. But
Yeah.
that's a really good question. I think I could go on and on and on.
Yeah, because then I'm like, how many ruptures do you get? Is there a time because I got some
Now
people
listen.
married 10 years and 20 years, and they're like, man, my spouse, they keep apologizing for something,
Mhm.
but then they kind of keep doing it. And even though it may not be as frequent,
Mhm.
they're still doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is it even realistic? Is that for them to continue to open up? Because by them not opening up, yes, it may protect them, but it's also detrimental to the relationship in some way.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so you have this ongoing back and forth pattern of you can't expect me to keep opening up when you're upset, you use something that you know in confidence against me, but
Mhm.
then by not opening up, obviously that's unhealthy as well. And so it's this tension. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I get
Yeah,
it.
but you know what? And there's definitely tension there, but the goal is still the same.
Mm,
Everybody's trying to be at a place of safety. So even if I'm attacking you or throwing stuff in your face, I'm doing that to protect myself. Because if being from Memphis, I'm gonna get you before you get me.
yeah, hey, yeah, yeah. Oh, we both from Memphis, right?
Right?
Hey,
I'm gonna get you before
offense is
you
the
get
best
me.
defense. That's what I was taught.
Exactly, exactly. So as long as I stay in a place of power or
Yeah.
privilege, I'm going to win and I'm going to feel safe, even if that means destroying you. Now,
Mhm.
that is an example of an unhealthy
Yeah.
toxic dynamic, but that
Everybody from Memphis
also
is like, is that unhealthy? Yeah.
it is, I'll tell
Yes.
you, it absolutely is. Y'all better quit. But it is, that's you being in a place of safety. Now, if I shut down and I just become I disengage from the conversation, my body is responding to a stress, and I am going into a place where, typically people say you're shutting down or you're retreating. That's because I need to be safe. Because right now, something that you're doing or this external
Mhm.
stimuli is triggering me to take me out of my place of safety. So
That's good.
neither one of them are actually solving anything other than making us individually feel safe,
Mhm.
not necessarily repair a rupture.
Yeah, that's good. I'll have people sometimes who say, and sometimes they say with the spouse there, sometimes it's just in one-on-one sessions. I'm trying to get my man to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
What advice would you have for them?
Yeah. So I would say that's great. Now let's pay attention to, and I'm going to try to approach this from both sides. If I am trying to get my partner to open up to me, let me make sure that I'm not attacking him every time he does so.
Mm,
Let me make sure that I'm providing a space where he can do that. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't be held accountable because I think sometimes people think a safe space means let somebody run over you, let them do whatever they. No, it also means some accountability and
mhm,
being honest with people. But
mhm,
let's say that he- you have to model the behavior that you want to see.
mhm.
You have to not attack him every time or make him feel bad. Let people talk. I think
Yeah.
sometimes when a man is trying to be vulnerable and be honest, then there's this person, usually a woman, on the other end of that attacking and
Mhm,
trying to be right before he can even be honest.
mm,
Right. So we have to let people talk, be an active listener,
yeah.
and we learned that in counseling 101. But truly, let's put our thinking ears on like they used to do in kindergarten and just hear them out and
Mm,
listen
mm,
without saying anything.
yeah.
And I would say that those are the first couple of steps. Listen without attacking, listen without formulating a response, and be curious about what he's saying and why he's saying it. And if
Mhm,
I'm a man trying to practice vulnerability, it's going to take me some time to do that. It's going to take some repetition, some practice. It's going to take some heartache because maybe I'll do it and my partner is not in a place to receive it.
Mhm.
So it's going to take practice on both ends. Somebody listening without attacking and running to be right, and it's going
Mhm.
to take me practicing using the words because sometimes we misstep in being vulnerable because we think that that's our opportunity to then attack you.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's our opportunity to be honest about what's happening with us. So saying, "Hey, when you did this thing, it made me feel this way.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that. When you did this thing, what I heard was let's talk and then we can talk about it." So
Mhm.
calling out examples, being cognizant of how you felt, how you responded. I think that's a good step to practice vulnerability on both ends, and also know that you have to practice. That's why I say that's you notice I'm not saying don't do this, don't do that.
Mhm.
Let's begin to practice doing something different to get a different outcome.
Mm.
Now, I'll tell you, Dr. Hardy, I am a fan of walking away. Now, people may not agree with that. But you were saying earlier,
But
with the,
sometimes I think I'm
sometimes
hey, you probably talking to the king, the old version of walking away.
get on up, and get out of there, and that's a whole nother episode and
It is.
conversation. But if I am consistently in a situation, I'm not getting my need met, no matter if it's a job or a person or a friendship dynamic, I'm not getting my need met, and my need isn't to harm anyone, myself or anybody else. And it's not to shame or embarrass myself or anybody else. Then we have to really evaluate, is this a situation that I can afford to
Mhm.
continue to be in? And when I say afford, truly your health.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And even a social and emotional unhealthy state over time will lead to physical
Oh yeah. That's why
unhealthiness.
people are in the doctor's office now.
100%, 100%. So
Yeah.
anybody that thinks that the two are separate, they're very much so related to one another. But let's say the person who wants to be vulnerable, but they really don't know how, and whether that's because they didn't see it modeled, um,
Yeah.
cultural influences. What steps would you encourage them to take? Like, how would you, if you were to give some roadmap and saying, hey, you've heard this, your spouse is telling you you need to be more of this. And again, I say men, but truthfully, this can go both ways. What
Yeah.
are the steps that they would need to take in order to get to a place of being vulnerable?
Yeah. I would start by there's a few different steps here, but I'm going to give options. Start by writing down or identifying in some way what you need,
Mm,
what you actually need. A lot of men don't know what they actually need
mm,
outside of their woman and a job.
mhm.
Many times men just say, "Hey, what do you need?" So, man, all I need is my girl and my job. I can make some money, provide for my family.
Yep,
Oh,
yep.
well,
Sex,
what else
yeah,
do you
sex and
need?
peace to that.
Yeah,
And we pretty
yeah.
much,
Sex, food, money, family is
yeah, a little
well,
peace, a little, calm,
yeah, a little piece, a
a little
game here and there. Exactly. But no, so we really do have to identify what we need and communicate that somehow. So whether that's me journaling it and just saying, hey, I think I actually need every Friday, I just need to create community with my boys again because I haven't seen
Mhm,
my people in a while. Or
mhm,
I need some time to exercise, or I need this and I need that, right? So I think starting with what we need, and that also sometimes takes us back to when did life feel really good? When did I feel connected? When did I feel in control?
mhm,
Start there with just identifying those needs, and then once we can figure that out, then let's start communicating that as we go by, just
yeah,
like at work when they say, hey, go ahead and make your list of why you need to be promoted or why you deserve a raise.
mhm,
We're going to do the same thing in a relationship. So look at your needs as a raise or a
yeah,
promotion, because now I get to go from one place in the relationship to another.
mhm,
So I would say start there. And then when we're talking about communicating that out and asking for that need to be met, practicing vulnerability, sometimes that also looks like, hey, do you have time or do you have capacity to have this conversation about what I've been thinking about Friday at 8 o'clock? All right, let's
mhm,
have a family meeting. Or let me put this on your calendar. I just want to check in with you and communicate some things that have been on my mind. Right. So I'm already setting the scene up, not trying to leave anybody in suspense, because I'm already communicating with you what my expectation is in terms of the conversation. And
Mhm.
say, hey, you can even be honest and say, hey, this is hard for me.
Yeah.
Even that's a skill to say, hey, this is hard for me.
Mhm.
I've been noticing that this is what's been going on with me, and I'm wondering if you see it too. That's an option because
Mhm.
sometimes people will see things, but this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I need. So the problem, the solution. This is how I see it happening. I'm curious to know your thoughts. So
Yeah.
curiosity is definitely going to get us the
Mhm.
extra distance.
Now I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, and
Hmm.
only because it comes up. How
Yeah.
do you I don't even know if this is a communication issue, but how do you say what you need without the other person hearing it as this is what they're not doing or take
Mm,
offense to what it
yeah.
is you're saying you need? Because a lot of times, and I've seen this, men and women,
Hmm.
one person will say, this is what I need. And instead of hearing what they need, they hear what they're not doing.
Hmm.
And they become defensive and
Yeah.
unable to actually sit in the, okay, you need me to do this, because all they hear is, oh, I'm not doing this, and all these things that you're not considering. And what about when I was here and I was tired and I got the kids and then I'm working and then I'll just, and then you go in this unhealthy circle
Yeah.
where, I mean, whether intentional or unintentional, now you've made it about the other person.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly where I was going to say that all we did there was just took that person's vulnerability away. We shot them
Mm.
down and we attacked them.
Mhm.
Right. So even if we didn't put our finger in their face and berate them, we attacked them by taking their that away from them that moment because it was about them and not about you. So that's more about an ego thing.
Mm.
If that's an ego thing and an insecurity thing, because now I feel like I'm insufficient
Mm.
or I'm not enough. And
Mhm.
that was probably something that was going on before me. Or
Mm.
maybe it was something that I helped contribute to, right?
Yeah.
Depending on what we've been through and how long we've been down through there. But we have to make sure that we keep them. I always tell people, keep the main thing the main thing. What
Mhm.
is the problem to be solved? The problem to be solved in this moment is the concern that was brought to the table initially.
Mhm.
Let's solve one thing at a time. All right, I hear you're doing this and you're doing that, and you got the kids and you're moving, you're shaking. I appreciate you for that. I acknowledge that. I am simply communicating to you what I need. So truly, if I am communicating my need, I'm going to keep bringing it back to that. I'm going to acknowledge where you are, but I'm going to keep bringing it back to me and where I am. And if the other person on the other side of the table just cannot, and it continues to be explosive, I'm walking away.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, you know what? This isn't working. Let's separate for right now because this isn't getting anywhere. Let
Yeah.
me go into this room, let you go, here, and we can try to come back to it. Now, if we come back to it and then we're on this pattern and this hamster wheel of this is what's happening every time, then you have a bigger problem.
Mm.
And I would imagine that that's showing up somewhere else as well.
Yeah, and that's so good because you're right. Whenever you can't have, in many ways, what I would consider a basic conversation
Hmm.
about things that aren't surface level, it
Hmm.
definitely speaks to a deeper rooted issue in the
Oh
relationship.
yeah. Yeah, you probably screwing up at work too. And,
Yeah.
and not able to get along with people and you're not keeping friends. Like
Mhm.
the way you show up here, you're doing that somewhere else too.
Mhm. And
Right.
people will say, "No, I don't. It's just with you." And it's like, okay, well, you don't have to
Okay.
self-awareness because you probably are doing it in other
Yeah.
places. I'm
Yeah.
just the only one that calls you on it.
Yeah.
Do you think it's harder for men to be vulnerable, or do you think it's harder for women to be vulnerable, or do you think it just depends?
I think it depends on how life was set up for you from the start.
Mhm.
Thinking about the relationships that we had in childhood and the way people reared us, I would say it starts there. Now, I think that there is a difference in terms of men having permission to be honest and be vulnerable and identify feelings because of this framework of how people teach masculinity, and it
Mhm.
doesn't really make room for feelings identification and being emotive. And I think that women oftentimes are nurtured to express their feelings, and it's okay to feel this way and to do this and to do that. So I think that there is this difference there, but in terms of ego, feeling rejected, we're all the same, right?
Yeah.
And so even though that there are these biological differences in the way that the way that people have taught us and the way we've been conditioned, no one wants to feel rejection, man
Mhm.
or woman. No one wants to feel their ego bruised. No one wants to be attacked. And so I think that that's where we have more similarity, where we can end this conversation of um, men this way and women this way. But I do think that depending on how we were raised or the images that were shown to us, men I've seen have more issues with being vulnerable.
Yeah. What do you think? And I only ask it for men because I know that's where you focus said. In your experience, what has been the most challenging thing for men to be vulnerable about in their
Hmm.
intimate relationships with their spouse?
I would probably say all the things that we are taught that make us masculine and worthy.
Hmm.
And when those things aren't in play, then we struggle with being vulnerable about it. So, sex, am
Hmm.
I performing?
Yeah.
And money, am I making enough?
Mhm.
Providing, am I doing that? Right. So these are the frameworks that we were taught in. If you can lay it down, you can hold the woman, and you can provide, then you're a man. And
You
that's it.
good.
Keep your
Yeah.
head down, keep your mouth closed, right? And when those things aren't in
Stay
play, I
out the
think
way
we
at that point.
exactly stay out the way. Happy wife, happy life. And that is such a played out
Oh, it is.
perspective because that's where men lose their ability to be more because
Mhm.
happy wife, happy. Well, what about me? I can't even show up. Right. And
Mhm.
so I think that when we talk about what makes it difficult for us to be vulnerable, I would say the framework in which we see masculinity and then feelings and emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
We struggle with identifying this is how it made me feel. This is this mind body connection.
Mhm.
And all right, I felt sad. Well, how do you know you felt sad? Where did you feel that in your body? Okay, I felt anger. Well, what triggered that? And taking the steps and going back in time and processing that, I think we struggle with that because we're just learning how to do it, especially if you weren't raised in an environment where that was readily available to you.
That's good. Dr. Dodson, I appreciate you so much. Man, this has just been a great conversation. Where can people find you at online and how can people connect with you?
Man, I graduated to UNC status, so
Okay.
I tell people, look, I'm old. I don't know how to use these things, but you can find me on Instagram at it's Dr. J Keith, ITSDRJKEITH, and LinkedIn at Justin Dodson, PhD LPC.
Awesome. We're gonna include both of those links in the bio as well. Make sure you follow Dr. Dotson, man, fellow Memphian. We both from Memphis, so I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you so much. Everybody else, definitely tune in to other episodes of Untherapeutic. Make sure you subscribe, follow us online at Nic Hardy _ no K. Thanks so much.